It's been our custom over the past conferences that at the very end, I come up here and try to sum everything up and issue some challenges going forward based on the kind of collective wisdom that's emerged, and try to inspire you again to continue helping each other as you go back to complete your projects. And I do that generally with some, brilliant insights that I pull out of the sky and assemble from all of the material that's been presented here so far. I decided this year that I would try to do something a little different. And that is that I would call on people to come up here as a panel. I sprung this on them midday, actually, so, we have to, give them our encouragement and thank them for doing this effort. So, you don't know who they are yet, so don't clap yet. It's you, no. And I thought it would be appropriate to have assembled up here the current configuration of people. First of all, my sort of partner in crime in all things IMTFI since the very beginning, Scott Mainwaring, who is the head of our external advisory board and sort of, the alternative what Bill would be if Bill weren't in academia person. So please welcome Scott to come up. Scott. And next, I thought that it would be good to have a new postdoctoral researcher representing some of the stuff yet to come for this conference, because tomorrow, as you know, there's a closed-door session just for the researchers that will be led by our former postdocs, but also our new postdoc, Minu Tanka. Minu, where are you? Please come. There you are. Come on up. And then for the sake of sort of history and continuity, I thought it might be good to have a former IMTFI fellow, someone who we funded in the very first year, I believe, who has now gone on to great things as an assistant professor at the Australian National University, Carly Schuster. And also a former research assistant at IMTFI who's been involved in a lot of it since the very beginning, but now is finishing up his dissertation on dollarization in Ecuador, and also helped very much in bringing our Ecuadorian team here to IMTFI, Taylor Nelms. Taylor. So I've asked them to just spend some time thinking about some of the broader lessons learned from the conference this year. They're each going to speak just for a few minutes. Then we're going to open up the floor for one last round of questions and discussion. And then I'll say a few words to wrap it all up. So let's just turn it over. You guys want to go in this order? Or sure. OK, great.
Thanks, Bill. So I just had a couple sort of broad ideas I wanted to throw out. I think from an external or industry perspective, what industry needs and is looking for is opportunities to collaborate. So the conference, I think, has demonstrated all kinds of ways already that that sort of multidisciplinary collaborations between academics, between companies, governments, NGOs. It's sort of demonstrating in the very work that it does the kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that needs to happen in order to have an influence in industry. Along these lines, I just wanted to give a shout out to the paper you all received from Aaron and Gwaine, kind of a call to action around really bringing together different communities to all think about, in this case, global consumer finance. I guess I'd also point to just to be parochial for a second, the panel that I moderated yesterday, I think, demonstrates a really wide range of disciplines that are represented here. So we had from Jonathan Mordick, kind of classic lab-based cognitive psychology practices, and from Andrew Crawford's case study of getting financial literacy content inserted into comedy television being played on buses in Cambodia, kind of a point to advertising and communications as disciplines or fields that we need to engage. And then thinking about Ana Echeverry's and Copelia Haran's The Formal Disguise, really nice critical analysis looking at rhetoric versus reality, in this case in Colombia. So go collaboration. The second point, I think that a thing that industry likes a lot is not to have to worry about all kinds of pesky individual differences, cultural differences, like there's so many different countries. They like to have global standards that they can think about, or global models that they can apply universally. And part of what we need to do is, of course, push back against that. But I think another way that this community can work at that level is to really think not just about transborder flows of money and people, but transporter flows of ideas, like what an up-to-date cell phone looks like, what the GSMA kind of defines as different schemes that mobile phones can support, usage models that they want to promote as widely as possible. So I think understanding how these processes that involve global actors and global flows of information, whether they have to do with the GSMA or the UN or the World Bank, we've heard over the course of the last 2 days these ideas surface in various levels. I think that's a continuing to be an important domain that we can more explicitly engage with. I do want to just throw out kind of the foundational, one of the foundational technologies that we all know and love, M-Pesa. I think it's fascinating that it is both a Kenyan achievement that really hasn't been replicated elsewhere, but it's also a technology that was developed through DFID in the UK by Vodafone and other actors in London. So it has both a global story of technology development as well as a local one. And I think this kind of unpacking of all the phenomenon we're looking at as having both global and local intertwined, entangled histories is good. And I'll just finish, I think, along these lines. One of the kind of standards or roadmaps that is happening is the roadmap that brought us from feature phones up through into smartphones. And a lot of what we're seeing now in developing countries is the amazing work that feature phones can be put to. Kind of especially amazing if you think that it's just a few Roman alphabetic lines of text is the display that you have to work with. Smartphones are on the horizon, and I think it's not too early to start thinking about the impact that they're going to have, and the challenges that they're going to face in terms of adoption. So one thing to think about is how mobile money looks, what mobile money systems look like when there's a mixture of devices, some feature phones, some smartphones, some other devices, maybe I love the lockbox with the satellite dish attached example of technology. How do these sort of ensembles of different technologies, which ones are going to be important in thinking about mobile money going forward? And then I think also that we've heard a lot about the need for literacy and financial literacy, and I'll just point to the smartphone as I think even it's yet to be realized, but the kind of high resolution color, beautiful colored displays just offer all kinds of new ways to communicate with people visually, through video, through all kinds of more engaging media forms. So I think it holds a lot of opportunity for making use of the new displays, just that one piece of technology that are on their way in terms of thinking about how we might think about literacy and literacy training. So that's my thoughts, and I will turn things over to Taylor.
Thanks, Scott. I just have, as you all know, I'm Taylor Nelms. I'm a PhD candidate in anthropology here at UC Irvine and a former research assistant at IMTFI. I just have a few points sort of gathered throughout the last couple of days that I want to touch on. The first is, and I think we saw this especially today, this morning, the importance of studying and working with state and government actors. The need for including government, right, and the state in our research, not only as a policymaking or regulatory actor, but of course also as the emitter of money itself, right, the top of the fiat money pyramid, right. And Enrique came up to us earlier this morning and he said, I think it's so important to be able to study the state. We also need to be able to think about some of the problems, right, and this is some of the problems that he listed for us and that we've seen in some of the research today, right? Problems of access, but also problems of institutional instability, right? And that includes shifting legal and institutional conditions, as we learned from the Mexican and Ecuadorian projects in one of the panels this morning, and as Jing Gusto helpfully highlighted for us, this instability can also include simply the turnover of individuals in government offices, right? You can go 1 month and meet with officials who respond well to proposals and whom you have a rapport with, and then return the next week and see that they've moved on to a different office or someone else has shown up to take their place. I think all of this simply drives home the fact that the state is not a singular monolithic or homogeneous actor, right? The state is always constituted by multiple interests, agendas, projects, institutional cultures, and so on, not all of which align in any kind of useful or straightforward way, right? And in fact, we can see conflicts both between state offices and even within some of those offices, and that open up lines of contestation. So, the Ecuadorian project this morning, I think, introduced a really interesting case, right, that opened up the question about one state institution, the central bank, right? And what is a central bank? Here in the US, we tend to think of the Fed as in terms of monetary policy, right? This is the normal way or the sort of normal thing that we associated with a central bank. It's the one who issues currency. But of course, the Fed and most central banks do other things, right? They have other missions. And that includes also payments regulation and infrastructure. And as Charles from Nigeria pointed out, and as other people pointed out throughout the day, if it's not the central bank, it's someone else allied with them. But these are the institutions in charge of consumer protections, often at the national level as well. And of course, those missions don't necessarily align with fiscal or tax concerns as well. So you have a whole range of missions and agendas that are a part of the state. So I think we need to think about government with the same kind of fine-grained attention that we give to people's everyday practices, right? Because government is of course also itself an everyday practice. We need to think about those everyday practices in long-term socio-political contexts. In other words, right, history matters, right? That's something we also learned from the Ecuadorian project. But also that there are different histories of the state in different places, right? So we need to think about the state in Latin America or in parts of Latin America versus the state in parts of Africa or South and East Asia, right? So to think about what constitutes the state, people's relationships with the state in all of its heterogeneity. So that's one thing, right? To think complexly and fine-grained detail about the state. The second thing is about the infrastructures of accounting through which people channel liquidity, through which they manage risk, and through which they juggle, as Miriam and Magdalena and Nia and Josh have all told us, through which they juggle forms of value, right? And I think we've seen at IMTFI conferences in the past, and including this one, the tools we use, right, in part constitute us as economic decision makers and economic actors. So we heard from Jonathan Murdoch and Enrique about how the material form of money, whether cash or credit card, can affect spending habits. And Allison pointed out to me earlier, right, that we know that cash has a kind of inbuilt metering mechanism, right, a sort of measurement mechanism that goes along with the sort of denominational capacities of cash. We heard from Ana and Copelia about the material design of insurance systems, and we heard a lot today about savings. And of course, savings isn't one thing, right? We can save for many, many different reasons, but savings is also often connected with a very particular kind of material infrastructure, the commitment devices, right, that we heard about throughout the day that encourage and facilitate the transformation of short-term value into value that perdures over time. So think about the difference that Sibel pointed out to us between saving in small amounts for short-term periods over the cell phone versus the 13th cow, right? As an investment vehicle, a form of value that endures and in fact can reproduce. Or think about, I don't know those of you who've seen it, but think about the metal savings box that was donated to Ellen at the Smithsonian in the back, right? The savings box that works through physical separation, and this is something that those of us who've worked with local financial organizations have seen a lot. But this box was really interesting to me because there's no way to open it, right? You just put the money in, and then when you need to get it out, you literally have to tear it apart. You have to destroy the box in order to get at what's inside of it, right? Take some shears to it. And so there's a way in which that material infrastructure, that material technology constitutes a saver, right? Constitutes someone who saves. Well, I can go on and on. I was just talking with Silva, and we've heard from them about the effect of having a debit card on savings. And what's interesting to me, right, is the way in which having a separate material card, right, helps people to differentiate between two different earmarked accounts, right? So having that separate card is also one of these sort of material technologies that help to constitute us. So this is just a call to think again and to continue to think about all of the artifacts, ephemera, and so on that facilitate money management and accounting. So those are two of the lessons that I've taken away, and I found the conference really inspirational. And I hope that we can continue to talk about it. So thanks a bunch. And next, we'll have Carly Schuster.
Great. Well, I only have 1 point, so I'll let us all get going early. Thank you so much to Bill and to Jenny for inviting me back. It's wonderful to see how IMTFI has grown over the years, and also the rich network of researchers that are continuing the great work on these really key themes. And think I'll start by noting that in year one, there's a really kind of marked difference in where these technologies were at as far as the research that was being pursued by myself and the first kind of wave of researchers. I think that there was only a handful of research teams that were working on M-Pesa because it was a kind of a new thing. No one really knew what was going on. They thought, kind of see how this was sorting itself out on the ground, what the infrastructure looked like to put it in place. But a lot of us were kind of thinking about financial inclusion and thinking about mobile money as kind of horizons that we were working towards and possibilities. And so it's really wonderful to come back and see the research programs that can be assembled around technologies that are now durable and instituted in remarkable ways. And they bring up a whole new set of questions, whereas that first cohort broadly looked at credit and debt technologies and microfinance. Now mobile money has really kind of come into its own and matured. And I noticed a theme or a set of kind of questions around mobile money that really kind of struck me as different from that first year. And one of those kind of sets of themes is around the question of access and accessibility that mobile money promises to users and also to those of us thinking about financial inclusion. And it's a theme that has a set of keywords really that popped up throughout these last 2 days. And along with this question of access and accessibility, there seemed to be sometimes a tension or a puzzle, a paradox, with an opposing impulse towards secrecy or privacy or discretion as another set of values about how people use money. So kind of accessing money also brought up a set of questions about how to keep that sort of access under control, like who had access to it, in other words, and how that was mediated socially. So we saw this kind of effect of access and accessibility over a couple of the papers yesterday and today, starting with Sibyl Kusima's terrific paper on rites of passage and boys' circumcision ceremonies, where on the one hand, the 13th cow was this really visible display of wealth, but it was kind of vulnerable to being disappointed if you couldn't kind of get it together to get the 13th cow. And then kind of how sad that is if you're disappointed in displaying this kind of extravagant kind of ritual. On the other hand, these private stores of wealth on phones would quietly fill those gaps. And so part of the access enabled by those mobile monies was also about discretion and privacy and kind of keeping secret your accounts. Also yesterday with Jonathan Murdoch's wonderful kind of research program on risk preferences, he was wondering and worrying over and theorizing the unintended consequences of dematerializing money, like making it into monopoly money. And part of this is kind of about keeping lines of sight on money. So accessing money in new ways, like having cash that you can see and count in your wallet versus stored away, kind of made visible or kept private, kind of different kind of money and its different practices. So again, this kind of question of access also in tandem with discretion. Maria and Oscar's paper on the Bolivian rural women who have had to travel vast distances in order to access their mobile money really dramatize the kind of issues that come up with that sort of distance. And when you're accessing your money, kind of being able to kind of keep private your accounts when you have to entrust one woman in the group to take everybody's account transfers and try to get them from Potosi. And discussing this later with a colleague who works in Tanzania, who had made clear to me and had this wonderful story about using mobile money in Tanzania meant going to the larger market towns and immediately converting that money into durable goods to kind of bring back with you. Because if you came back with money, and if people knew that you came back with money, then you would immediately be vulnerable to all sorts of demands and requests on that sort of money. So kind of accessing money meant immediately turning it into not money, so that those demands could be staved off. And I think that today we really saw with Julia's and Dorothy's paper on elders who become especially vulnerable because they have to go through these middleman agents in order to access their money. And their very kind of access is what makes them kind of susceptible to this really intense bodily violence, right? So the kind of very predictability of the tool, the fact that it's transparent and accessible and you know it comes every month, means that the drama of getting that money every month puts you in harm's way if you are an elder, and everyone knows that you are a specific kind of target of this program and therefore have access to cash at a particular time. So access and discretion really becomes a social drama in that context. And finally, the kind of last example that really struck me was Magdalena, Nia, and Joshua's study of transborder economies, and the fact that this is really inflected by gender too, where women in particular have to protect resources in particular ways. And so the question of access and who has access to money cleaves along gendered lines, where the demands on women's resources are already stretched so thin, and they're already juggling so many different obligations that making visible those points of access can actually be kind of a terrific and terrible drain on those assets. So kind of meditating on this kind of set of keywords and questions around access and accessibility, it made me think that access seems to be itself a social and cultural phenomenon. So we think of it as a goal in the policy world, but also the set of papers and research projects really seem to kind of show that this is actually kind of a deeply contextual and situated and mediated set of questions. So what would that mean to study access and inclusion, not simply as a kind of end result of mobile money, but also as a social and cultural phenomenon? And these papers all show this kind of really deep and profound knowledge of local context. So how can we harness that to better understand access and accessibility? And as a kind of last set of questions that comes out of that, if we know that we need to pay attention to the social and cultural inflections of access and accessibility, one kind of promising direction, I think, to go would be to pay attention to the people and the economic practices that make it work in practice. Everything from the agents who are dispensing money and also kind of mediating these complex social relationships, all the way kind of up to Safaricom and how they're disseminating information and accessing information. So I think that we've seen a real need to contextualize end users and their access within the networked relationships that make them work. And this move has been kind of productively thought of in the microfinance world, trying to understand how loan officers and kind of other kind of agents within microfinance are really key to making microfinance work on a daily basis. Perhaps mobile money also needs that same sort of unpacking to understand the labor that makes money move. And we could really see this with Jane and Nguyen's paper on the complex relationships between Mshwari and the people who are being trained and the kind of users. The idea that kind of you could be misrecognized as Safaricom agents, I think, shows that there's kind of a lot of people in the mix here who are mediating access to these technologies. And although end users and their outcomes are really important, in order to understand them, we need to understand that whole kind of chain of nested relationships that make it work. I wonder, as a kind of last throw it out there reflection, if it might be something about the platform of the phones that seem to be kind of popping up all over that's really kind of hiding some of this intermediating work, since individuated users seem kind of very clear in a lot of these stories. And we could even see this with the diviners who are asking questions to the ancestors, and the kind of suspicion that you don't know who your daughter is talking to if you're on the phone, right? The relationship is already kind of cloaked in this sort of secrecy and privacy. So it seems very clear that individual kind of users are the ones who are accessing technologies. But on the other hand, I'll throw in a story from Paraguay, my own research. There's this wonderful movie, and everyone who's interested in money and informal economy should watch it. It's called Siete Cajas, or 7 Boxes, and it's set in this informal market in Paraguay, downtown. And you sort of watch economic relationships move around as cell phones move around. People pass cell phones to one another. They kind of misrecognize who's calling and who's getting called. In order to do business deals, you have to move cell phones through this economy. So it really kind of showed me that this seemingly straightforward relationship of kind of individual and kind of mobile money technology actually is tracing out a really complex network of social relationships that's highly embedded and really kind of spans the whole kind of informal economy. So thinking about these platforms, how does access, this need for kind of privacy and discretion, all kind of get hooked together with the use of mobile money with these new technologies? So thanks. I'll throw it over to Mrinalini to have some final thoughts on the day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here amongst this great group of colleagues, and I really enjoyed each and every presentation and also all the informal animated chatter during downtime. And I'm really excited to see how all your projects develop, and I look forward to working with all of you in the next year. And thank you, Bill, for inviting me to speak and making some remarks. So like Carly, I was also part of the first cohort of IMTFI researchers. And I also see this sort of shift where there are a lot more panels about mobile money, and I mean, there are many more conversations than there were in our year. But unlike Carly, I'm going to actually talk about something that I see that has not changed in the conversation, or that continues, or a question that continues to be of utmost importance, right? I actually work in a context where mobile money basically does not exist. I work in Cuba, and people are constantly dealing in multiple currencies, but it continues to be a very cash-based economy. But there is one sort of overarching theme, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in all these presentations today, and I think it's sort of key when thinking about uses and practices of any kind of money and currency, and that is the question of trust, right? Whether it's Tigo money, whether it's Orange money or Wing money, or whether you're in Giginto or in Sabinia, these are all contexts where trust is super important. And trust is something fundamental and contentious at every level of social organization, whether it's in the family or the neighborhood or the village, or sort of larger global circuits of exchange, right? And the fact that trust in financial practices is sort of fraught with multiple cultural and conflicting values is evident in all your presentations. So, I mean, we reluctantly trust anyone or anything, right, to facilitate our expenditure and transfer of or saving or storing of money, right? Money lenders, formal banking institutions, providers and agents of new financial services, mobile money operators and technologies, I mean, and much less our family members, right? We don't even trust the earnest and honest researchers that come around asking questions about our mobile money uptake, right? So, and this is again true for men or women, rural or urban areas, from the poorest farmers to the richest industrialists. And so yes, we all have trust issues, especially when it comes to money. And I think the question that we all have to probe further is why? Right? Why do some people trust chit funds or soothsayers or ancestors and deities over banks and state services and other regulatory authorities? Why do some trust the central bank to be the mobile money service provider over privately operated financial services? Why do people trust cash over mobile money? All these why questions, right? And clearly trust is very complex, it's stubborn, and most importantly, it's historically and socioculturally specific, and evokes all sorts of deeply entrenched hierarchies and inequalities and relations of power. And all of the findings that you've presented in the last 2 days identify this as a kind of common existence, right? This distrust or mistrust in various forms of money and the financial institutions that accompany it. So to unpack more rigorously this lingering theme of trust, right? I think we have to pay more critical attention to its nuances and to the cultural and historical embeddedness of trust. I think we all have to reconsider another kind of trust that we are all guilty of in some capacity or the other. And that is the sort of unconditional trust we bestow upon our particular methodologies and conceptual frameworks, right? To understand the problems of financial inclusion, but also the trust we confer upon certain financial products and services that we assume to be its solution. So trust can be both liberating and limiting. I mean, that's not to say that we should be suspended in this eternal state of skepticism, but we do need to sort of tear apart that metal box that Taylor was talking about, that Ellen Feingold so generously showed us. We need to juggle and toss around ideas with colleagues in trusted spaces, such as this one, where respectful disagreement is not only tolerated, it's celebrated. And that makes us better scholars and practitioners and allows us to design better tools to enhance financial literacy and capability. And this conference has really brought together different people to the table, different grassroots voices and various academics, industry, and development practitioners, all concerned with questions of money and financial inclusion. And we don't normally see such a range of differently situated people and conversations in the same space. And this really shows how unique IMTFI is and how serious it is about collaboration. So just to mention, tomorrow we are having a closed-door workshop for our researchers that will be about methods to sort of to give you more of a sense of how to proceed further, to rethink your methodology, to think about how your big data can be complemented by a kind of ethnographic and qualitative eye, to think about how these broad patterns and trends can be enriched with more historically and culturally situated questions, and to address the sort of stickiness of trust, right? And we're going to do that tomorrow in a workshop. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bill for the final words.
Thank you so much, Minu, and all of you. Let's give them another round of applause. I thought that was absolutely fantastic and covered so much and much more than I could have done in any kind of summation here. I know that we're getting close to time here, and the buses are going to come to pick everybody up at 5 and 5:15 to go to dinner. So we probably will have to hold questions. What? 5:15 and 5:30? 5:30, 5:45. Oh, okay, good. Well, then we have some time. So let me just say a few words, and then we'll take some questions if we have time. Echoing what Minu was just saying, one of the things about IMTFI is that this is now, in a way, a 6-year-long conversation that began with just a sort of handful of people and now has grown and grown and grown to around 140 people in 43 different countries. And I'm delighted that at this conference we were able to bring colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire and from Mali, countries we had not had represented before, in addition to hearing some more rich material from the East African countries that really were the kind of ground zero for the instigation of mobile money, together with all of the work that was happening in the Philippines, where we also kind of started some of our efforts with IMTFI. And I think the virtue of a long conversation, one where we invite more and more people into that conversation, is that it's not that we're kind of arriving at one answer. It's instead that through this diversity of perspectives and positions and people and contexts and countries, we're able better to continuously revise our hypotheses. And when I opened the conference, I talked about, kind of where we started thinking about microfinance, and then thinking about savings, and then thinking about digital payment platforms and cashlessness, and how questions of consumer protection kind of gradually bubble to the surface, and questions around doubly and triply and quadruply marginalized peoples came more and more to the fore as we saw what was happening as mobile money services and other digital payment platforms were coming to town. That sense of being able to continuously revise our hypotheses, I think also suggests something else about IMTFI that's rather unique. There are, other research institutes and centers in academia, in industry, in policy, and elsewhere, where I think the idea is that people all kind of come together, and there's an idea that everyone has to start to toe one line. And I don't think we toe one line at all, which is kind of terrific about this place. The anthropologist Jane Geyer writes that she's writing about equatorial West Africa. She says that historically anthropologists and historians and sociologists would go and would see chiefs and important men and would assume that the people that they were kind of assembling together were in a way an accumulation of followers, that more and more and more followers makes you more and more powerful, right? And she says, in fact, no. When you look at the stories, when you look at the social practices, when you look at the histories of these peoples, you don't see folks accumulating followers. What you see instead is this kind of contingent composition that for one kind of task, it's important to get this guy with his abilities, this woman with her spiritual knowledge, this other person with their material wealth, and this sort of fourth person with their tie to the ancestors, and put them all together just for a while to get something done, right? A momentary composition. But then they all go back home and disperse and do their own thing until the next time, when they need to consider a new question, need to take on a new challenge, and folks once again are kind of composed based on their own unique ability, strengths, and access to various kinds of resources. I like to think that IMTFI kind of represents that same kind of composition, right? It's not that we're assembling an army here that's going to go and give all the answers to the development community or to the mobile industry or whoever, but instead that we're this constantly emerging network, this kind of supple and constantly evolving and changing community of inquiry, coming together with a certain kind of generosity, again, of intellect and spirit. And I do, want to thank all of you for that generosity that's been exhibited here over the past couple of days. A couple more things. I'm very pleased to announce that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has given us a supplement to our grant, which will enable us to have another call for proposals and another round of research and a conference. We will be announcing next week that new call for proposals, so please tell all your friends, and we will distribute it out over the internet and elsewhere, and you can all forward it on to other people via whatever channels you've got. It was wonderful to hear some of the themes come up from our commentators just now, because in this call, we're hitting in particular on a few things that were mentioned, such as one of our key questions is around trust. Another of our key questions is around what's going to happen as smartphones start to kind of get more broadly disseminated. What's the role of public institutions, especially around consumer financial protection? What are some of the unmet financial needs of people that are always there in our stories, but we never necessarily directly address, like the agents in mobile money services? What do they need? What's up with them? Or the merchants who more and more are having to deal with mobile and digital payment? How are we really going to start thinking about the place of women and girls in this kind of new technological landscape? And how are we going to be thinking about folks who are in very remote places? Again, I think it bears noting that there are a few people, a couple people who couldn't make it because of their remoteness, and we were fortunate indeed that our person caught in the typhoon was able to make it after all, and we're very pleased that you could be here with us, Bernadette. So I think what I'll do now is open the floor to comments and questions for a bit before we kind of formally close. So the floor is yours. And we've got the mic.
Thank you. I think the first person, I forgot your name, but you're mentioning about collaboration in industry, and also throughout the presentations, heard these names sprinkled around: Tigo Money, Orange Money, Mshwari, members of my association. So it's refreshing to see that you guys are interested in these services. Speaking to a few of the researchers, they were unable to connect with the actual, or collaborate much, or connect with the organizations. So I wanted to hear from you guys. On one extreme, if you collaborate too closely with these industries, then you turn into market research, or you're biased and you're influenced certain ways. If on the other extreme, if you don't collaborate at all, or if you're completely separate, then they don't benefit from that, or your research maybe just exists in papers and it's not really acted upon, or the value is limited. So I wanted to hear, what is that kind of balancing act? Where do you guys want to sit? And maybe we could support that collaboration or achieve that balancing.
I wonder if some of our researchers who have had some experiences want to do any sharing on this question. I'm looking at a couple of them. But, go ahead.
In our case in Colombia, when we first did our research about developing new services, it was basically about guidelines that whoever or whatever player wants to participate in that market, we want to make this knowledge available. So we have faced some problems trying to actually get to the person that could be an influencer within that organization. We can obviously mail or try to make an invitation to an event and promote this knowledge, which is open. We keep saying, it's not, you don't owe us anything. We are not part, this is knowledge that you can use. And still, people don't seem to have the power or be those influencers within those companies. So we are still trying to get into the game networking partners, high up. So finding that key person is extremely difficult when you're no one. Why are they going to give us an appointment? So we keep facing that part. So we're not just about distributing our research and making it known for people that won't be doing anything actionable with it. It's we know we have to reach exactly the person that. So anyway, I was asking yesterday someone, how can you guys help us to reach those influencers in our countries? It's Carlos Slim. How can we, see, who am I to speak with him, to us, or to any of the people around him that can actually make a difference? Same case happens with the main banking companies in Colombia. I mean, those guys are like way up. They are all the time in Europe. They are in the, okay, so what do we do? So for us, it's been a challenge. And this time, what we were thinking was, you know what? If no one is going to pay attention to us, let's pitch this project to the local government and see if we can actually put it together through some entrepreneurship program or something. So that's pretty much what has happened to us. Mm-hmm.
So I can speak for Ghana. In Ghana, there've been several IMTFI projects done, and one of the common things that a lot of the researchers faced was not being able to get access to the MNOs to have open conversations. One of the concerns of the MNOs that we found was that they were concerned about the confidentiality of the information. One of the reasons being that there was a lot of poaching of employees going on between the different companies, and so they didn't want their information to get out. So it was very hard trying to get industry information. But one of the things that helped the process was an IMTFI-sponsored conference in Ghana, which brought the researchers, the MNOs, and representatives from the places that we'd been collecting data. Because one of the things that we tried to keep telling the MNOs was what the messages that we were getting from the field, which they didn't really care about because they had their own research teams going to the field and getting information, which was very different from the information that we were getting. So it was a beautiful thing to have the market women in the room so that if the MNO representatives say, oh yeah, we do training in the markets, then we could ask the market woman, well, did you receive training? And they would respond no. So that was one avenue where there was open communication between some of the groups. But for Ghana in particular, it's been pretty hard to get information for different sources. So to answer the question, what would the perfect balance be? I think it depends on the specific research question. I think that if we're looking at what kinds of interventions or what kind of products will work, I think it's probably a good idea to have the researchers work a little bit more closely with, the product designers and providers. But there can also be times, for example, looking at barriers to uptake and so on, where an independent perspective might be better.
Thank you. I would like to appreciate IMTFI for inviting us from Tanzania. And I note that you don't have any activity in Tanzania, despite the fact that Tanzania is the second from Kenya in terms of mobile financial services. And Tanzania has got a better ecosystem in terms of leading the world in this case. However, I wanted to appreciate, because after meeting Jenny in Trinidad and Tobago, we started talking about the research issue, not only for digital finance, but for financial inclusion. Then this came to my mind, and that's why you invited us. I'm here with the Central Bank. Johnson is the head of research at the Bank of Tanzania, and we all both think that we need to build capacity in our market. The issues that I would like to highlight here, I think some of them have been mentioned in a way, but I think what I wanted to hear more is the interaction between this group researchers and those that are in the delivery or design and delivery of financial services, whether in digital form or not. Because unless we are answering their questions, it's difficult for us, to push that frontier that far. And the more we really put ourselves in the shoes so that we get to understand the kind of evidence they need to help them make decisions, I think we become more relevant, and our space in this research area would really add value. So the more the opportunity we have here, Bill, is that we have time, we have the brains, we have the expertise, and I think what is happening in the markets right now, is there's been little attention or focus on understanding the demand side more and more. We tend to think about products, and we focus less on understanding about the challenges the consumer or the potential consumer is facing in such a way that we can come up with solutions. In the digital space, it's not about mobile financial services, it's digital finance, because people have got many more challenges they need solutions for, whether it's for water, whether it's for energy, whether it's for education, whether it's for health, other than financial services that we talk about here. In terms of the delivery of financial services, I have not heard, or at least there are those that will come later on, those who research on delivery systems, delivery models that make sense to our markets. In the case of Uganda yesterday, we talked about the rurality of the financial services in digital finance space, and therefore the delivery models that we see happening, which largely apply in the urban areas, it's yet to be known whether they will be effective in the deep rural areas. So what would be the research agenda that informs, maybe models, testing them, different value chains and how they come together, and which space does digital finance actually occupy in the way that it can really bring impacts. So this brings me to the point of understanding the digital ecosystem. It's one thing talking about rural and urban. For me, these are markets, these are geographies, but I think there are people with economic activities, with real financial needs, and therefore the ecosystems that in which digital finance can really play, their understanding is quite important. So in my view, if you talk about financial services, we all fight what we call the mattress account, because majority of the people still keep money at home. Digital finance is just, I think, second, at least in Kenya and Tanzania, that I know, and because we do research as well. And therefore, much as we talk about digital finance, mobile financial services, it's largely remittances, payments. We want people to save, fine, but in what way do they save, and are those ways they are using meaningful? In the inflationary area periods, like in our case, it's only recent that it's gone down to a single digit. The person who saves in kind is probably smarter, because if he keeps money in the bank, then the value is eroded. But he or she does that not necessarily with good this understanding. So the design issues that will really help the ecosystem to take advantage of the digital developments is something that we would like really to focus on. I heard one of the presentations talking about research using randomized control trials, RCTs. I'm not necessarily a believer in randomized control trials in terms of financial services, because I think the population or the sample would be very porous. But I think she brought about the issue of impact. And in this case, I wanted to really talk about the impact in the way that this group can really help markets benefit from it. Whether it's impact of policies or regulations, whether it's impacts of delivery of those financial services and products to the people, that can be discussed. But I think what I wanted to say here is that there's a little I heard about the focus on impact of financial inclusion. Access is one thing. Usage is actually what we are looking for, provided the solutions that we provide or we design or that are designed are of the right quality. But in the end, they use financial services, we use financial services for, so what? That's the impact question. How is this group really preparing itself so that it can address these questions? And from the development world point of view, I think the proof or the proving that this actually leads to better livelihood of people is also very wanting. So how are we positioning ourselves there? The last point, Bill, is we meet here. This is my first time. I'm not a researcher, and I came here as an observer who is interested to ensure that we build research capacity in our own country. Are you thinking of gathering us or whoever is going to be there interns here in California, what about one time taking this group somewhere else where the action actually is, say in Uganda, and then we can have an opportunity really to bring on board those who are actually giving us this information, or those that we are actually searching on, whether they are MNOs or banks or savings groups or policymakers and the like. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just take a minute to respond, but then I think we should go back to Carl's hand. And thank you both so much for coming. I mean, one of the ways that we do hope to be shaping some of the conversations in this space is by having folks such as yourself at this event. And there were others from various parts of industry that were here yesterday. There were some others from other philanthropic organizations here today and yesterday as well. You've offered us a number of challenges and provocations, which I hope we can take up. But on this last one, I can't resist but to say that this is exactly our plan. And well, now we're going to fight over where we're going to go. But we're actually sort of thinking of going to Tanzania. So Uganda first. Listen, we can have an arm wrestling competition. See who wins. But this is as we've been doing what we've been doing. We very much have come to value this moment where everybody comes together and from all over the world to meet each other midway through their projects. We've been talking very seriously about not replacing this, but adding to it at least one convening a year elsewhere. And we know that not everybody can come. It becomes logistically challenging sometimes. But the Ghana conference that Vivian mentioned showed us how important it could be to bring some of our researchers together with local stakeholders and to have the market woman challenge the telecommunications regulator or challenge the service provider in a forum which I think importantly is defined by an academic setting. Because one thing that we've also come to realize, and we knew, but really got driven home by the experience of doing this with IMTFI, is that the university and academia can provide a neutral space, right? Can provide a kind of platform where anybody can come and anybody can say anything, sort of. People at least don't have to feel like, they have to always be wearing the hat of their government or their industry or their company. We've had a few other convenings here, for your interest, where we've brought together regulators and representatives of industry and have had requested that the identities of the people participating be kept confidential. So, like, we did that once with a very small convening because folks didn't want their competitors to know that they were here. So it's interesting. We've been navigating, but thank you very much for those challenges, and we'll flip a coin tonight about Uganda. Maybe both. Anyway.
Okay. For me and my colleague Jude, I want to use this opportunity to thank IMTFI for inviting us. Actually, this is our first time of being in the U.S. We thank you greatly. One of the things too I must cherish here is the value I've added to myself. I have PhD students I supervise, and financial inclusion is actually new in our area. And I think I've gotten one or two or three things that are very valuable I'll take over there, particularly to the benefit of my students. I'm particularly pleased with the guy from, I think, Ecuador. In fact, from what I got from him, he solved a major problem we have in our country. That's why interactions like this is very, very important, and people have made that possible. But in 2011, in my state, Anambra State, we had problem with the donor agencies and their donor activities. There were a lot of conflict, duplication. And then somehow UNDP advertised, and some of us did consultancy job for them. And in my own case, for instance, I handle the job consultant to look at possibilities of effective aid coordination. And at the end of it, from the work, it was good, and we advanced on it and got it an aid framework for the state. And one thing I noticed in UNDP and the work there is that they always do a post-research activity, whereby stakeholders, particularly the users, policymakers, through what they call town hall meeting, and then you meet and you can be able to effectively disseminate your findings so that they can add value to maybe any challenges or problem in that area. I don't know whether IMTF, whether you will have something like that, but I will encourage you to let there be a kind of a post-research activity from the point of dissemination. So it gives opportunity for letting the policymakers and then the users of the outcome of the research so that they can add value. Thank you.
I think, can we please, we haven't heard Bernadette ever speak, so let's have her. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to thank especially IMTFI for giving us the opportunity to be part of this, of the sixth round of projects. So in my experience, when I saw your announcement in my school, Ateneo de Naga University, I was really encouraged. I did not have any second thoughts of submitting proposal because your IMTFI gives importance to the financial inclusion of the poorest of the poor. So that's what really inspired me to participate. In my place, I would say there's no difficulty in terms of putting people together because we have good relationships. The academe in my place and the local government have good relationships. So in the objective of my study, I actually placed there to influence policy as an output of my research. And I did not have any reservations of placing that because I see it can happen. It can happen when I finish my research. There's a high probability that I'll be able to influence policy, at least at the local level. And then also in the public sphere, our government encourages public-private partnership and inclusive growth. So with all of this in place, I would say my work, when I finish my research, would be easier, especially because, as I've said earlier, our goal is the financial inclusion of the poorest of the poor. And of course, I'm also from a province which, as I think have been presented in the first day, I'm in a province which is considered one of the poorest in the Philippines. So as to the issue also of trust, I would say in my place again that from Ateneo de Naga University, we are a sectarian school, and whenever we go to the communities, that kind of trust and high regard is already there. They don't even ask why are you going to interview us, or why are you here? Who are you? Where are your identification? There's nothing on that. The trust is already there because again of the relationship between the academe and the people in general. My university, the Ateneo de Naga University, has already forged partnership with communities, at least within our vicinity. So it's very easy to enter and integrate with the communities. So again, I would like to thank the IMTFI, and then of course Bill for giving us this opportunity. As you have said earlier, we are here to gather, to give feedback, to share. But at the end of the day, we go back to our places, and I think I would identify myself on that. When we go back to our place, when I go back to my own area, I would be able to be more effective especially in pursuing the research to be able to finish this, and then eventually I hope to also influence policy from the output that I would be able to gather from my research. Thank you.
Aladi and Deepti, and those might have to be the last two. Maybe him first and then Deepti.
Once again, thanks everybody for the wonderful presentations, and thank Bill, of course, for what he has been doing. I couldn't help thinking that this has inspired me to think about the emergence of global mobile economy. So it's not just regional kinds of things. So, what are the implications? So, for example, recently I was in Madras, Chennai, and there is this lady who works at the American consulate as a security officer. And then she was talking about transferring some funds to her daughter who is going to university in the US. So, and she was talking about, some of the money transfers and so on and so forth. So I think there is a great opportunity for the center to even encourage probably one or two proposals next year. What is the global mobile economy? What are the implications and so on and so forth? It's no longer regional, specific to what countries and so on. So this conference has inspired me to think along those lines. Thank you.
So will you allow me to be brutally honest here? A little bit controversial statement also. Maybe India is I don't know, saturated, when it comes to research. We struggle sometimes to partner with practitioners. Maybe many researchers meet with them, contact them, or probably do not get back to them, whatever the reason is. Sometimes, when we go to them with our questions, our research questions, or even with findings, sometimes we face difficulties. I think I would ask this question to Amol, you and our colleague on the first row from Tanzania, as a practitioners. What kind of message, we talk about dissemination, what kind of dissemination is more appealing to you? How should we reach out to you? Is it just, like you mentioned about this being papers somewhere, we go to practitioners with a lot of papers, we don't even know if they read or not read. How should we disseminate? Should we be more creative about dissemination? What kind of message would be more appealing for practitioners? Otherwise, sometimes research could be a very lonely journey also. I mean, I'm being a little controversial, sorry for that.
Amol, do you want to just say a word? Or?
That's great, but that's not a question that we are really asking. So there might be, some area to get buy-in that they want to ask these questions too, but then there's a risk that might influence your research and might, turn you into market research. So that's something that we could talk offline, how we get that balance, that you guys don't turn into market research, which, I don't think you guys want to do. And then the other point real quickly is that maybe, if your point of dissemination comes from a voice of the industry, not saying me, or I'm not volunteering us, but if it comes from a voice that that the person you're targeting recognizes more, because they might not recognize or not really understand academic research and might not know what to do with you guys when you do approach them. They might think that you're doing academic research or not understand the value of that for industry. But more to talk about offline.
Thank you. And we'll actually be spending some time tomorrow on dissemination and ways of reaching diverse constituencies. Because one of the things that you've developed over time here are a number of different formats for getting the research out. And you see some of that represented in some of the materials at the back of the room, as well as the video that we saw earlier too. So let me just bring this to a formal close, because I know that we'll have to get the buses to go to dinner in a minute. You know, it's always very important, of course, to offer thanks, and I would first like to acknowledge and thank the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has been standing by us and supporting us since 2008, the very beginning, and is now continuing with this supplement to our grant. And we greatly appreciate the faith that they've put in us to do something a little different and outside, I think, the comfort zone of a lot of agencies and organizations that are out there in this space thinking about poverty alleviation and financial inclusion. I could thank the School of Social Sciences, but that's sort of me, so I'm not going to thank myself. But I will thank the UC Irvine. No, I do want to acknowledge the UC Irvine Student Center and their staff for the support here. I want to call out also, separate from the Student Center, Ian Granger and his fantastic team in the back, who have been ensuring that we've been getting the live stream out to all the folks who are watching it. And it was, 175 people earlier. I don't know what it is now, but it's just been fantastic. Liz Losh, who's been blogging all along, had to step out, but some of you have already read what she's produced. It's remarkable that she's able to do that in real time. She said to me earlier that this is the one of 2 times a year when her hands hurt, but that she still loves to do it anyway, sitting there typing away. So thank you to Liz in absentia. Steve McCord in the back has been interviewing some of you and videoing to produce a film about IMTFI and what we do. And thank you, Steve, for coming. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to the product. I was thrilled when Ellen Feingold said that she would come. She's been sitting back there representing the Smithsonian Institution, doing some acquisitions, getting to know us and what we do, and thinking about her own curatorial plan now at the National Numismatic Collection at the National Museum of American History. Ellen, thank you so much for coming. I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the moderators who have done the terrific work of sitting up here and keeping everybody on time, and also offering their own thoughts and encouragement along the way. Yay, moderators, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was the first year when we actually tried a different thing with the moderators. In the past, we've had members of the academic board who are all professors at UC Irvine moderate. This year we thought we'd mix it up by inviting some new people in, having some returning fellows, and so on. So thank you to the moderators. As you've seen, there's a kind of small army of graduate students and current and former postdocs who have been helping make everything run smoothly. If the students could step in for a second. One of them's hiding. Nathan just hid. There he is. Nathan and Nate and Stevie and Sean and Taylor's been helping out as well. And Nandita is somewhere. I don't know where she is, but there she is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Minu, of course, thank you so much. Minu, yay. Ursula Darlinghouse will be joining IMTFI as of January 1st. So stand up and we'll just clap for you anyway. Yay. Thank you, Ursula. Now, there are some people that really make the trains run on time, who keep us honest, who make sure that we're complying with all the things with which we need to comply, and kind of shake their fingers at us sternly when maybe we're taking a little bit too long, or maybe not stretching things out a little bit enough. John Seaman there in the back is our man with the sense of how things should be run. And we have a small token to present to John. Please help me out here. It is the holiday season after all. We have a tiny miniature Christmas tree and a little gift for John. Yay, John. And you all know that none of this would happen without a very special person who has been referred to as our mother. I don't know how I feel about that, but she must be really, really, really tired if she's the mother of us all. She's still standing, but she's leaning against the wall here. Jenny Fan, thank you so much. And I believe the students have the small token as well for Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Yay. Yay, Jenny. Okay. Thank you. Yep. Thank you very much. This is just always such a delight. You know, for all the trials and tribulations, the people who get lost in typhoons, the people who don't get visas multiple times over, the people who are having a baby like right now, right, and couldn't come. But it's always just such a thrill for me and so wonderful to see this network grow and to learn so much every time. So thank you all. We will be going to get buses when John tells us, and I think he might be telling us now. And we'll be going to a very nice Italian restaurant for a dinner together, and we can talk a little bit more about the bus that's going to pick people up tomorrow for the closed door session. You're all in for a treat. It's going to rain in Southern California. It is, you know, no joke, like it rained a little bit last week, it rained a little bit the week before, but it hadn't rained since February 2nd before then. So I don't know if anybody brought an umbrella. Now watch it not be anything. Watch it just be like a little bit of spit from the sky. But they're saying it could be really bad. So I hope you are all prepared and, you know, can handle it when we're there. So yes, Jess. Okay. Jenny just wanted me to tell people that tomorrow, for folks who are coming to the closed door session, the bus will pick you up at the hotel at 8:30. Okay, so the bus will pick you up at 8:30, take you to the venue where we're going to be holding it, which is the Balboa Pavilion on Balboa Island, modulo the flood that might come and wash it away. And then also there's going to be a bus for people who, we know that there are some people who want to go on a shopping spree. So there'll be a bus to take people to a place to go shopping after the Balboa Pavilion in the afternoon. Okay? That it? Great. All right. Thank you again, everybody. I look forward to seeing you at dinner.